When faith meets fire. What happens when a global superstar steps onto a stage, only to be ridiculed for the one thing he holds sacred? The lights were blinding, the crowd electric. As the theme music of Voices in Debate echoed through the studio, everyone braced for yet another night of intellectual battle. At center stage stood James Holloway, a man as feared as he was revered, a TV host notorious for cornering his guests, stripping away their polished personas to expose what lies beneath. Tonight, though, something was different. Tonight's guest wasn't a scandal-ridden politician or a media-trained mogul. It was Justin Bieber. Yes, that Justin Bieber, the pop icon who grew up in front of the world, the chart topper turned introspective artist, known now more for his quiet humility than for his once controversial fame. Justin walked onto the stage in a sleek black suit, no tie, his long hair tucked behind his ears. But it wasn't his outfit that caught Holloway's eye. It was the silver cross hanging just above his heart, subtle but unmistakable. And to Holloway, it was the perfect target. You see, James Holloway didn't just ask hard questions, he weaponized them. He didn't debate, he dissected. And that tiny cross, that small glint of metal on Justin's chest, was all the opening he needed. The moment Justin sat down, the air shifted. You could feel it, not tension, but expectation. Holloway leaned in, smiled that smug, camera-trained smile, and fired the first shot. You've never really spoken about faith publicly, Justin. And yet, here you are, wearing a Christian cross. Why? The room froze. It should have been an easy takedown, a moment of hesitation, an awkward explanation, maybe even an apology, but none of that happened. Justin didn't flinch. He didn't stammer. He simply looked the host in the eye, rolled the cross gently between his fingers, and answered, not with defense, but with quiet conviction. And from that moment on, the game changed. Because James Holloway, for all his experience and rhetorical flair, didn't realize that tonight wasn't just another interview. Tonight, he was the one being examined, and the world was watching. The opening salvo, the applause still echoed as Justin Bieber settled into the leather armchair across from James Holloway. The contrast between the two was striking. One calm, composed, silently observant, the other poised like a predator, eyes gleaming with the thrill of confrontation. Justin Bieber, Holloway began, leaning forward just slightly. It's a pleasure to have you here. The pleasure is mine, James, Justin replied, voice steady, almost serene. Holloway gave a brief smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. You've got a reputation, he said, twirling a pen between his fingers, for being the nice guy of Hollywood. Quiet, private, always polite. But I think there's more to you than what the world sees. Justin offered a small, knowing smile. I think we all have more layers than we show the world. No doubt, Holloway said, his tone sharpening ever so slightly. And that's exactly what we're here to explore. There was a pause. Holloway's eyes flicked down, subtle, intentional, to the silver cross resting against Justin's chest. Now tell me, he said, gesturing toward it. You've never been particularly outspoken about religion or faith, and yet here, you are wearing a very visible Christian symbol. Justin didn't shift. His expression remained calm. His fingers, almost without thinking, brushed the pendant. A small, silent habit. It has personal meaning to me, he answered. Personal, Holloway repeated with a scoff. Come on, Justin. You're a public figure. Everything you wear, everything you show, it sends a message. That's not just fashion. It's a statement. The audience stirred. Some leaned forward. Others exchanged quiet glances. This was classic Holloway, drawing blood without raising his voice. Still, Justin didn't bite. He stayed composed, eyes steady. Holloway leaned in, voice dripping with mock concern. It's 2025. The world has changed. People have changed. And yet, here you are. He pointed directly at the cross, wearing an archaic symbol, the E word hung in the air like a blade. Archaic, Holloway repeated, smirking. Religion, faith, belief in things we can't see. I mean, I believe in progress, in reason. And frankly, I find it surprising that someone like you, modern, intelligent, worldly, would still cling to something so outdated. He chuckled, as if explaining away a childish fantasy. Look, he continued, gesturing broadly, I get it. When someone's uneducated or hasn't seen the world, sure, maybe faith is all they have. But you, he raised an eyebrow. You've toured the globe. You've seen cultures. I expected more. A few scattered laughs from the audience, nervous ones. Justin's gaze didn't waver. His stillness spoke louder than any interruption. Then finally, he answered. Interesting, James, he said, voice calm but firm. You talk as if faith and intelligence can't exist in the same person. Holloway laughed, a short bark of disbelief. Come on, Justin, let's be real. How many wars have been fought in the name of that cross? How many people have suffered, been condemned, even killed because of it? Justin ran his thumb over the pendant once more, not in defense, but as if grounding himself. Do you want to debate history? He asked. Or do you want to debate my necklace? The audience murmured. A sharp intake of breath here. A hushed whoa there. Holloway's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to pushback, especially not from someone so poised. He forced a chuckle, but his fingers now gripped the armrest a little tighter. Fair enough, he said, his tone tightening. Let's simplify it. Are you wearing that cross? As a statement, a declaration of belief. It was a trap. A yes, and Holloway could accuse him of promoting religion. A no, and he'd seem hypocritical. But Justin didn't take the bait. He tilted his head, eyes locked on Holloway's. Then, without raising his voice, he asked, Are you wearing that expensive watch on your wrist as a statement, James? As a declaration to the world? A pause. 1 second too long. Then, laughter erupted from the audience. Holloway's jaw clenched ever so slightly. This wasn't going the way he planned. Justin hadn't just sidestepped the trap. He had flipped the entire conversation, and the audience knew it. Turning the tables. The laughter hadn't yet faded when Holloway straightened in his seat, forcing a grin that didn't quite hide his irritation. He was used to being the one in control, the conductor of discomfort. But now, Justin had turned the room. Still, Holloway wasn't about to concede. He leaned forward again, this time lowering his voice just enough to sound dangerous. All right, Justin, he said. Let's be blunt. In a world of science, evolution, and technology, do you really believe that symbol on your chest still has a place? No preamble, no theatrics, just a direct strike. The audience fell silent, the kind of silence that sinks into your bones. Cameras zoomed in, trying to capture the flicker of reaction they were sure would come. But Justin didn't blink. Instead, he leaned forward too, closer, quieter, and asked calmly, James, if you don't mind, may I ask you a question? Caught off guard, Holloway blinked. By all means, he replied, trying to sound amused, but his voice carried a crack of uncertainty. Justin studied him for a moment. What do you believe evolution is? Holloway scoffed, sitting back. Come on, Justin. Evolution is progress. It's growth. It's about leaving outdated beliefs behind, moving forward into a world driven by evidence, not stories. Justin nodded slowly, considering. So, to evolve is to abandon everything that can't be. Measured in a lab, Holloway smirked. Well, if something can't be proven, it's just a comforting idea, right? The room held its breath. Justin didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply asked, And what about love? The question landed like a drop of ink in clear water, quiet, but instantly spreading. Holloway blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? Love, Justin repeated. Can you measure it? Can you hold it in your hands? Put it under a microscope? Has it ever been proven in a lab? A few people in the crowd shifted. Some leaned forward. Holloway scoffed again, but this time the confidence faltered. I mean, love exists. Of course it does. But can you prove it? Justin's tone never changed. Have you ever held love in your palm, James? Or is it something you just believe is real? A hush spread through the studio. Holloway looked down, as if searching for a script that wasn't there. He chuckled without humor. You're not seriously comparing religion to love. I'm not comparing them, Justin said. I'm asking, if something can't be proven, does that make it worthless? His words hung in the air like smoke, soft but suffocating. You talk about faith like it's a crutch, Justin continued. Something people use because they're scared of thinking for themselves. But what if, for some, it's a bridge, not to control, but to connect, to remind us that we're not the center of the universe? Holloway opened his mouth, but Justin didn't give him the chance. You brought up war, persecution, pain caused in the name of belief. And you're right, those things happened, but we don't ban fire because someone burned a house down with it. We teach people how to use it properly. We don't destroy every ideal just because it's been misused. The audience was frozen, breathless. I wear this cross, Justin said, fingers brushing it again, not to declare superiority, not to convert anyone, but because it reminds me, every day, not to act like I'm better than anyone else, to be compassionate, humble, kind. He turned slightly, eyes locking with Holloway's again. What about you, James? He asked, softly. Do you believe in anything bigger than yourself? The words hit like a thunderclap. Not loud, but undeniable. Holloway sat up straighter, face blank, but his grip tightened on the armrest. For the first time, the audience could see it. This wasn't a game he was winning. Not tonight. We're not here to talk about me, he muttered. Maybe we should be, Justin said, almost gently. That was the moment the room shifted. This wasn't just about a necklace anymore. It was about the man who wore it, and the one who couldn't understand why. The power of poise. James Holloway sat motionless, the question still echoing in the room. Do you believe in anything bigger than yourself? It wasn't just a rhetorical jab. It was a mirror. And for a man so used to controlling the narrative, being forced to confront something personal on live television wasn't just uncomfortable. It was threatening. But Holloway wasn't ready to back down. He straightened his tie with slow precision, composing himself, then leaned forward with a practiced smile. You're clever, Justin, I'll give you that. Turning the question back on me. Nice move. Justin didn't respond. He didn't need to. But let's not pretend, Holloway continued, trying to regain momentum, that this is about me. You're the one sitting here wearing a religious symbol in front of millions. Whether you say it or not, you're promoting something. Am I? Justin tilted his head. Or am I just being honest about who I am? Holloway raised a brow. Symbols have power. You can't just wear one and pretend it's neutral. So, Justin asked calmly, if someone wears a rainbow flag, are they promoting something? The studio tensed. The question wasn't confrontational. It was simple, but its simplicity made it impossible to sidestep. Holloway hesitated. Not long, just a beat, but enough for the audience to notice. Well, he said, recovering quickly, that's different. A rainbow flag represents equality, inclusion. Justin nodded. And you don't think faith can? The audience stirred. Again, some nodded. Some watched Holloway closely, waiting for his next move. Faith, Holloway said, his tone sharpening, has been used to exclude people, to justify hate. You can't deny that. I won't, Justin said. It's true, but so have governments, so have ideologies, so has science when twisted by power. Nearly every belief system in history has been weaponized at some point, but we don't erase them. We evolve them. We grow. We learn. Holloway narrowed his eyes. So, you're saying religion is innocent? Justin shook his head slowly. I'm saying faith is like fire. It can warm a home, or it can burn it down. But fire itself isn't evil. It's just power, and power always reflects the one holding it. A hush fell over the crowd again. Not the silence of confusion, but of understanding. Holloway's jaw tightened. "So," he said, almost accusingly, "you really believe, after everything religion has done, that people still need it?" Justin didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" The word snapped out like a lash. Justin took a breath, not out of uncertainty, but from thoughtfulness. "Because logic alone doesn't fill the human soul," he said. "We live in a world where we can connect to anyone in an instant, and yet we're more disconnected than ever. We know more, but we feel less. We've explained the stars, cured diseases, unlocked information, but people are still lonely, still afraid, still looking for meaning." Holloway didn't interrupt this time. "For some," Justin continued, "faith offers that meaning. It reminds them to forgive, to hope, to see others as more than just competition. I'm not saying everyone needs faith, but I'm saying I do, and I don't think that makes me weak. I think it makes me human." The audience was still, drawn in, leaning closer, absorbing every word. "And what about the harm?" Holloway asked, though his voice lacked the sharpness it had earlier. "What about those who've suffered because of it?" Justin nodded slowly. "I've thought about them. I've read the history. And I grieve it too. But we can't judge an idea only by its misuse. Otherwise, we'd have no justice, no law, no medicine, no love. Because all of those things have been corrupted too." He turned to Holloway again. "You asked if this symbol still has a place in the modern world. I think it does. Not because it's perfect, but because we aren't." And then, with soft certainty, he added, "It reminds me to be better." A pause. Holloway looked down, his fingers tapping against the chair arm. A nervous tick. For the first time, the conversation wasn't about winning. It wasn't about power. It was about truth. And in that moment, Holloway didn't have the louder truth. Justin leaned back slightly, his presence calm, unwavering. "I don't expect you to believe what I believe, James," he said. "But maybe, just maybe, you can respect that I believe it, that anyone does." The silence that followed was profound. This wasn't the kind of moment that trends online for its drama. It was the kind that lingers for its honesty. And even the people in the back rows could feel it. Justin hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't argued, hadn't accused, hadn't flinched. But he had done something far more powerful. He had held his ground with grace, and in doing so, he made the world pause. The tipping point. For the first time that evening, James Holloway looked unsettled. He had launched the interview with sharp angles and calculated strikes. He was the sculptor of pressure, the man who chiseled away personas until only vulnerability remained. But now, it was he who had been carved into silence, by calm, by conviction, by a man who never once raised his voice. But Holloway wasn't done. He couldn't afford to be. His reputation had been built on confrontation, on winning. And if he let this moment slip, if he let Justin's words linger unchallenged, it wouldn't just be an uncomfortable interview. It would be a loss, a public one. He straightened his jacket, steeling himself with a thin smile. "All right, Justin," he said, his tone regaining its edge. "You've spoken beautifully about humility, compassion, and personal belief. But let me ask you something very real." Justin nodded. "Go ahead." Holloway leaned forward, his stare sharpening. "What about all the people who've suffered under that symbol you wear? The ones judged, condemned, exiled in its name? You speak of faith like it's a source of light, but millions have been burned by that same fire." The audience shifted again, this time not in discomfort, but in anticipation. Justin sat quietly for a moment. Then he smiled, small, genuine, steady. "You talk," he said, "as if the symbol itself is to blame. Isn't it?" Holloway pressed. "No," Justin replied. "It's just a cross, metal and memory, It doesn't judge, it doesn't hate, it doesn't burn anything. People do that. He held the pendant between his fingers, letting the chain dangle softly. If someone uses a hammer to build a home, he said, and another person uses that same hammer to break a window, do you blame the hammer or the one holding it? A low murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Holloway's lips tightened. That's a convenient metaphor. It's a true one, Justin countered. People have used faith to hurt others. That's real. I don't deny it. But the abuse of something doesn't make the thing itself evil. He leaned forward now, mirroring Holloway's posture, his eyes unwavering. You believe in justice, right? Of course, Holloway answered immediately. And yet, how many injustices have been committed in the name of justice? Justin asked. How many laws have been twisted to oppress rather than protect? Do we throw away justice because people misuse it? Holloway didn't respond. Exactly, Justin said, voice soft but firm. So why do we treat faith differently? There was a long pause, a charged stillness, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from absence, but attention. Faith is not the enemy, James, Justin continued. It's a mirror. It shows us who we are when no one else is watching. If people use it to divide, that's not a fault of faith. That's a flaw in them. Holloway tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked ever so slightly. So you're saying religion bears no responsibility? I'm saying, Justin replied, that faith is a flame. It can warm or it can destroy. But the fire doesn't choose. We do. The audience was completely still. No coughs, no whispers, just breath held in collective awe. You keep attacking faith, Justin said, gentler now, but have you ever asked yourself why it bothers you so much? That question landed like a punch to the ribs. Excuse me, Holloway asked, voice clipped. You keep coming back to it, Justin said. Every few minutes, another jab, another challenge. Why? What does this symbol, this idea, stir in you that you haven't made peace with? Holloway's expression darkened. We're not here to talk about me. But maybe we should be, Justin said. There was no malice in his tone, no gloating, just clarity. Because people don't usually fight symbols this hard unless they've been wounded by them. Maybe by someone who misused faith. Maybe by their own past. I don't know. But I do know this. He looked Holloway dead in the eyes. The loudest critics of faith are often the ones still haunted by what they lost. Holloway's jaw clenched. The audience sat frozen, entranced. This wasn't just a verbal exchange anymore. It was a dismantling, not of a person, but of a persona. The polished, untouchable Holloway was cracking. The control he held over the conversation had shifted fully, and now he sat across from someone who hadn't just deflected his challenges, but absorbed them, disarmed them, and returned them with empathy. You're clever, Holloway repeated, more bitter this time. Justin shook his head. I'm just honest. And that, more than anything, was what shook Holloway the most. Because it wasn't force that had flipped the stage. It was honesty, quiet, unapologetic, disarming, and it had changed everything. The aftermath. The interview didn't end with a bang. It ended with silence. A long, stretching, reverent silence that settled over the studio like dust after a storm. The kind of silence that doesn't come from lack of words, but the weight of too many. James Holloway, usually quick to fill the void, sat frozen. His fingers tapped restlessly against the armrest, betraying a rare nervousness. His eyes searched the crowd, then the floor, then finally landed back on Justin Bieber, still seated, still calm, still wearing that same silver cross that had sparked an unexpected war of words. I have to admit, Holloway finally said, his voice brittle. I didn't expect this conversation to go in this direction. Justin nodded. Conversations have a way of revealing more than we plan. The words were gentle, but to Holloway they hit like a gavel. He forced a chuckle, a practiced mask returning to his face. Well, I suppose this is the part where I thank you for your time and insights. "It's been a pleasure," Justin said simply, and somehow it was. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. As the cameras stopped rolling, the audience remained still for a beat. Then, suddenly, and almost in unison, they rose. Applause erupted, not polite, not performative, but thunderous and sustained. A standing ovation. Holloway looked around, stunned. The people who had once admired his authority were now celebrating the man who had unseated it, with nothing but grace and patience. The producers rushed in, the lights dimmed, and the credits began to roll. But what happened next wasn't on the script. Clips from the episode hit the internet within minutes. Not even an hour later, hashtags began trending worldwide. Justin Bieber wins. Faith under fire, house. The necklace debate. The viral machine spun into motion, but this time, something was different. This wasn't just a celebrity moment. It was a cultural pulse point. Commentators on YouTube and TikTok dissected every word. Podcasts debated the symbolism of the cross, the limits of reason, the power of quiet strength. Twitter was ablaze with opinion, admiration, and critique. Some called it the night James Holloway met his match. Others declared it the most important interview of the year. But no matter the perspective, one truth was unanimous. Justin Bieber had won, not by overpowering his opponent, but by refusing to fight on his terms, by staying grounded, by being, against all odds, unshakably human. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Holloway sat alone in his dressing room, scrolling through the reaction. His face, once composed, was tight with realization. He had underestimated him. He had mistaken quiet for weak. And now, the mask had cracked in front of millions. For the first time in his career, James Holloway hadn't just lost an argument. He had lost his armor. Across town, Justin didn't gloat. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't tweet victory quotes or grant follow-up interviews. He shook a few hands, smiled politely at the crew, and slipped into a black car that vanished into the night. His silence spoke louder than a press tour ever could. Days later, he finally posted something, just a single message across his social platforms. "We don't have to agree to respect each other. We don't have to believe the same to walk the same road. No hashtags, no links, just words." And in those words, people found more than a rebuttal. They found reflection. Because the real power of that night wasn't in a celebrity defending his necklace. It was in a man reminding the world that belief, real belief, isn't about winning. It's about standing for something, even when no one else will. And in that studio, under the harshest lights, with cameras rolling and provocation, at full tilt, Justin Bieber stood, and the world noticed. Closing. The ripple effect. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, the echo of that conversation continued to reverberate, not just through headlines and social feeds, but in people's hearts. Something had shifted. It wasn't just that a global celebrity had outmaneuvered a seasoned provocateur. It wasn't even that a silver necklace had sparked a nationwide dialogue. It was the realization that belief, real belief, could still stand tall in a world obsessed with tearing things down. Justin Bieber hadn't shown up to preach. He didn't argue with force or retaliate with anger. He listened. He asked questions. He answered with a kind of peace most people spend their lives searching for. And that's why it mattered. Because in a culture where outrage wins algorithms and shouting gets the clicks, Justin chose stillness. In a world that rewards quick comebacks, he chose reflection, and in an interview designed to corner him, he made space for understanding, for difference, for something deeper than just being right. The reaction wasn't just admiration, it was recognition. People saw themselves in him, not as pop stars or religious figures, but as humans, flawed, searching, trying to hold on to meaning in a world that often tries to strip it away. And maybe that's what made it powerful. Not the words themselves, but the way they reminded us that being grounded in belief doesn't make you naive. It makes you anchored. Whether you share his faith or not, whether you wear a cross or carry your own kind of conviction, one truth remains. We all want to feel seen without being judged, heard without being mocked, respected, even when we disagree. That's the path Justin walked, and maybe it's the one we should all try walking too. So what happens next? Well, let's just say this story isn't over. The next episode reveals what Holloway did behind the scenes after the cameras stopped rolling. And trust us, you don't want to miss what happens when the spotlight turns inward. Subscribe now, because in the next chapter, a new truth emerges. And don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Have you ever had your beliefs challenged? Publicly? How did you respond? This isn't just entertainment. It's a conversation, and we're just getting started.